So I have a tattoo on my arm, kind of part of the sleeve, where it's a young boy where he would be holding a man's hand, but it kind of disappears where the hands should connect. And that was just kind of a representation of, I didn't know my dad. I didn't really meet my dad until I was 27. So the bond that I was supposed to have with him, I never did. And I wanted to, I don't want to say commemorate that, but I don't ever want to forget that. I think that's what's made me who I am today. And it's always important to remember that.
I would say that's amazing because I grew up without my mother and my father early on, and I have four tattoos. And sometimes what I thought about getting or continuing it is that you realize how much of an impact that has on you, not knowing your parents. I don't know if it was like that for you, Kevin, but for me, it just seemed like I saw families everywhere I went. Is that
Yeah.
the same experience for you?
Yeah. It's interesting how I was very blessed to have really good friends who had really good families. And it's like they always kind of wanted to adopt me into their family, and we would have dinner over there and I'd stay over their house all the time. So I did get a family experience, or I guess maybe you'd say a normal, typical family experience from that. But yeah, I remember it was first grade, second grade, where you would go and the first day of school, you would go around the class and people would say, "What does your mom do for work? What does your dad do for work?" And I was like, construction. My dad does construction. I don't know. I have no idea. I couldn't tell you, but I assume it's construction. So yeah, I definitely had a very similar experience with that.
I was telling people something similar. I was telling everyone they're in management.
Mm.
And here, years later, I'm in management. But I don't have any kids, like really, not
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I'm repeating like the generational curse, as they'll call it,
of
right?
course, of course.
So before we get right into it, because I know you want to express and share a lot of your journey, like we just did, as well as help those who want to get into maybe this space that you and I are doing, or maybe just focus on life. So why don't you officially let everyone know who you are, where they can find you, and a little bit more positive news about yourself when we started off there, right?
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. My name is Kevin Palmieri. I am the CFO, the founder, and the host of Next Level University. It is a global top 100 podcast with 1,320 something episodes, listeners in 150 plus countries. And it's what we do every day. We do an episode every single day to help people level up their life, their love, their health, and their wealth. So you can just search Next Level University and you'll find us. At the end of the day, Terrain, I'm just a human who wants to impact other humans. And, I had my own rock bottom moments. I had my own rock bottom basement moments, but those are the things that really taught me how to be who I am today. And I think that self-improvement is something that has impacted me in so many positive ways. And I'm trying to help people understand why they are the way they are today. Why you are the way you are today is not what you did yesterday, most likely. It's most likely to what we were just speaking of, maybe the way you were raised, maybe the household you were brought up in, the energy, the toxicity. So I'm really trying to help people become aware of that and then use that awareness as power.
I'm one person that I found that in my life, I learned a lot more from falling down than I ever did from getting back up and walking.
Yes.
It took me a long time to understand that to run, you have to walk, and to walk, you have to fall. Instead of me looking at everyone else and saying that, hey, you're making $1 million from doing this. Me. I want to get into that as well. That's what started my journey, just understanding that my race is different than Kevin's race, and Kevin's race is different than our listeners today. So if someone wanted to understand what got you to where you were, let's start at the beginning. What was the motivation to start this and to continue forward?
Yeah, I had graduated high school, realized I didn't want to go to college, and then I just did a bunch of odd jobs, right? I was a forklift operator. I cleaned bathrooms in a hospital. I was on-call firefighter for a short time, personal trainer. I did many, many, many different things. And I ended up getting this very unique job opportunity in an industry called weatherization. So all that means is my company would go into large state-owned buildings, usually schools or government-owned buildings, depending. And it was our job to make those buildings more energy efficient. And I went from making like $15 an hour at one of my jobs to getting paid $120 an hour at this job. And I was thinking to myself, this is it. This is amazing. This is the best thing ever. This is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. I ended up making $100,000 a couple of years later. And when I got to the end of that year, I expected to feel drastically different. When I opened that final pay stub, I thought I was going to feel confident. I thought I was going to feel certain. I thought I was going to feel secure. I didn't feel any of those things. So I realized that for most of my life, and especially that year, I had lived unconsciously. I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing. I was just kind of winging it, hoping for the best. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So shortly thereafter, I was interviewed on a YouTube channel about health and fitness and mindset. After that interview ended, I said, imagine if you could do that for a living. And one of my friends said, you can. I mean, there's people out there that do it. So I started a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast shortly thereafter. And I was just having conversations, much like you and I are having, deep thoughts, deep feelings, deep emotions. What are your dreams? What are your goals? If you could do anything in the world, what would it be? I loved those conversations. But at that point, that was not paying the bills. So I was still doing this job, and something shifted for me, Terrain, where when I made the money and realized I was not willing to do what I did to make that money again, because that money did not bring me what I thought it would, I fell out of love with my job as I fell in love with podcasting. So it ended up getting to the end of that year. I was podcasting on the side. I'm working full time. I'm traveling all over the place for work. And I ended up having a really tough day, a really tough morning where I was sitting on the edge of a hotel bed contemplating suicide because I was just so out of alignment. I was so miserable. I was depressed. I was anxious. I felt stuck. I was afraid to start over. And then I ended up leaving that job 3 or 4 months later and going all in on what we're doing today. And honestly, the reason I continued doing it, and this was our conversation behind the scenes, it's not about the money, it's about the impact, right? When people reach out and say, hey, this episode makes me think differently, or because of you, I left a toxic relationship, that's what it's all about. There's no amount of money that can replicate that feeling. Obviously, money is great, it's necessary, but I think the fulfillment that I get from this is also way more necessary than I ever really understood. And I will never, ever, ever stop this, no matter how hard it gets. This is the mission, this is the goal, and this is what we're playing for.
That's a conversation I wish more and more people have, especially those who are creatives, right? I work in a corporate job, and very similar to you, I was at a point where I wanted to make enough money because I thought money equaled this. And then when I reached that money, I was like, okay, I don't have that objective. I can't unlock that secret passcode for those who are video gamers, right? I just couldn't make it. And then I said, what did I say? And probably you said this, let's make more money. So I started to make more and more money. And then I realized the more money I made, the less my passion was fulfilled. So it was going the other way because I was hitting a point in my life where where life was telling me, Terrain, this is not what you want to do. It keeps all of this going, but it's not going to continue to keep you going. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think that's where we fall into a situation where, like you thought about suicide because some people would actually take that step and they're not here with us anymore. When you look back, were you surprised that it reached that point, or was it something that you thought you had to go through to achieve what you're achieving today?
It's interesting because that wasn't the first time I had had suicidal ideations. I'd actually already been to therapy multiple times, and I assumed the more quote unquote successful I got, the easier life would get. I assumed the more money I made, the more problems would go away. There's a song, more money, more problems. I don't know. They might've been onto something. I don't know. But no, I think for me, I assumed the money would make all that go away. And in fact, it somehow made it worse, not because money is bad. And this is an interesting conversation I like to have. You will hear people say that money can't buy happiness. I disagree. I think money can buy momentary bouts of happiness. Money cannot buy fulfillment. And here's the hard thing. When you look on somebody's social media page and you see them driving a Lamborghini, pulling up to a mansion, having a pool, whatever it is, those things can make you momentarily happy, right? Going into a pool after a long day probably feels really good. But there's a difference between happiness and fulfillment. Fulfillment, if you want to be fulfilled, you must grow and you must contribute. If you want to be happy, you don't necessarily have to. Happiness is a dopamine spike. Fulfillment is you doing something that you feel you should be doing, usually to the betterment of others. And I think when I started to understand that, it started to make sense. And then I had to rebuild my relationship with money, because here I am thinking, well, I made the most money ever and I was the most miserable I'd ever been. Was that money's fault, or was that the way I was operating with the money? So yeah, it's something that I think, I don't want to say it had to happen, but I'm grateful it happened now because it's in the rearview mirror. And I think it just allows me to understand at a deeper level what a lot of us are going through. I understand at a deep level. If you really, really loathe your job, I understand what it's like to not want to go back. I understand what it's like to potentially imagine that job taking your life. So I think that just helps me help more people at the end of the day.
One example I can give in regards to what you said is that, as we discussed earlier today, I went to Vegas and I came back. Money allowed me to go to Vegas, you know, and you get happy when you purchase that ticket and things of that nature. But once you're done packing, once you purchase a ticket, that dopamine hit is gone.
Yeah.
But what fulfilled me was seeing friends, seeing people, meeting people, and you can take that experience and stretch it along your entire life. And that's something that I want to express to people, and I'm glad you pointed it out, is that money isn't as bad as people says it is, because it unlocks the door to many things. It can let you take your wife or your husband on a date. It can take your family on vacation. It can get you a nice car, a nice house. It's what you do with it. If you're going to, best example I can give is, it's like you're dating that girl that you don't know, that you know is not good for you. We've all been there, right? Mm-hmm. This toxic girl that's not there for you. When you see her, you feel great because she's good looking, she's sexy, she's all these other things, right? But you know you're not fulfilled with her. You have to find your fulfillment. Do you feel that you found yours, Kevin, doing what you're doing?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. The simplest answer is yes. And a good representation is I would do this for free if I had to. I think that's a really good understanding. In the beginning, I did this for free. And it was like, I love this so much. This fills my cup so much that I want to find a way to make this work. So this is my example for this. I think many people have their P's in the wrong order. They find something that is profitable and then they try to convince themselves that they're passionate about it. Like, oh yeah, you know what? I really love this job. Why do you love it? Well, I make 6 figures a year. And okay, well, no, why do you really love it though? Is that all? Oh, okay. Interesting. Where there's a lot of people who, and this, I like analogies. I'm a visual person. A lot of people jump into a pool and they're saying, okay, I need to stay in this pool for the next 25 years so I can get to retirement. Or I need to stay in this pool because the longer I stay in this pool, the more money I'm ultimately going to make. And then eventually they say, okay, cool, I'm done. I can get out of the pool. When you find something you love, you figure out how to swim. And then you figure out how to build a house in that pool. And you figure out how to breathe underwater. And you figure out everything. You don't ever want to leave the pool. You want to figure out how to exist in the pool. I think that's what finding your purpose and living a life with fulfillment is. You find something that you're super passionate about, and then you find a way to make it profitable because you want to do it forever. And that becomes the mechanism for you to do it forever. So yes, I am the most fulfilled I have ever been. I am also the happiest I've ever been, but my life is also the most challenging it's ever been. And I think that's an important distinction, because I think when we think of quote unquote success, we think of easy. And I might be the most successful I've ever been, but life is also the most challenging. It's good aligned challenges, but my life has definitely not gotten easier on the day to day. There are some things I don't have to do that I used to, sure, right? But I always like to put that out there because I don't ever want somebody to see it and say, oh, when I get to X level, everything gets easy. I don't think it's ever going to be easy, honestly.
For those who are watching, please continue to follow along and subscribe for more wonderful interviews with my new, definitely best friend, Kevin here. And we'll be back with